Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we're going to be starting something a little bit new. Most of my videos have been directed towards game masters with various tips and reviews, but today I'm going to be talking to players. And to begin this new player series, we're going to start off by discussing character backstories. In tabletop role-playing games, the game master handles the world, populating it with interesting places and colorful characters, while the players are each in charge of their own individual characters. Backstories are where we answer all the important questions about this character. Who are they? Where are they from? What do they value? Who do they value? What is their goal? What is their fear? And so on. Now, I'm not going to discuss how a player should go about choosing all of those individual things, as much as I'm going to discuss how a player should approach backstories in general. That way they're easier to fit and to incorporate into a campaign. Since starting my channel off, there have been two big gripes that I have noticed when it comes to backstories. One of them is players saying that my game master is not incorporating my backstory enough. And the other complaint is game masters saying that my players are not giving me workable backstories. And while those are both certainly gripes worth having, my gut instinct, my knee-jerk reaction whenever I see either of those complaints is, well, that's likely your fault. So any players out there that are wanting to have origin stories that their game masters can then weave into their campaign, or game masters who are wanting to help your players craft backstories that you're able to use very easily in your campaign, this video is for you. And players, the first thing that you need to do before you even write down the first word of your character backstory is to verify the game master's plans. First, see how much they intend on using backstory in this campaign. Just because your last game master did, or your favorite streaming celebrity game master does, or even the same game master did it in their previous campaign, it doesn't mean that the game master is planning to incorporate backstories in this campaign all that much. There can be a few reasons for this, but the simple truth is that if your game master has never told you that backstories are going to be greatly used in the campaign, then you can't blame that game master for your just assuming that they would if you never asked them. Now, game masters, if one of your players expresses interest in weaving backstories into the campaign, you had better pay attention to this. This is a request by your players of something that they would like, so you're going to have to address that with them. Give them either what they want, or you're going to have to give them a good reason why you're not able to do it. Now, you might not be able to tell them what that reason is before the campaign starts. It might be one of those surprise campaigns that's going to become obvious once it is, but you still are going to have a discussion with them about it at some point or another, but just to ignore your players is to fail them. Next, when talking to your game master, verify that the backstory is going to fit into the campaign. What sort of world is this taking place in? Is the character and backstory even appropriate for it? If we're going to be in some sort of water world, then your desert nomad character might not work for it. Verify if it will before you get your heart set on the character. This is something that's going to make everyone's time much, much easier if you have a character backstory that fits into the campaign. Now, game masters, this means it's now your responsibility to give your players a direction to shoot. If you don't give your players a request or a direction, then you can't blame them for making backstories that don't fit. Never just assume that they're going to somehow know what's going to fit if you didn't tell them. Now, players, if you're wanting elements and characters from your character's past to have an active involvement in your character's future, well, where they might show back up or resurface at any time in any game or anything like that, it's probably best that you choose an origin from within the campaign map. For example, let's say your game master plans on your campaign taking place on this map. Now, if the game master agrees, your character could come from the faraway land of somewhere or another. But if your character is from a distant land, that's not going to be the centerpiece of this campaign. The ease at which your game master might be able to bring in elements or characters from your character's past is going to be significantly harder because they're from somewhere far away. So instead of doing that, you might consider coming up with a character origin that comes from somewhere within the game map that the game master has made. You might point at this part of the map and say, hey, what's this? And your game master might say, oh, well, this is the city of Dyslick, and here's all the great information about it. And then you might say, maybe, but how about here? And your game master says, oh, well, that's the coastal city of Slidham, and here's all the great stuff about that. And then you might say, nah, that really doesn't work for what I'm thinking. How about here? Then your game master says, well, I really haven't done anything there other than just name it. So tell me, what is it that you're looking for? And I can either point you to a place on my map that does fit that criteria, or I can make that city more like what it is that you want. That way you can come from that city and it fits that idea. This serves a couple great purposes. One, you as a player are becoming more actively involved in the campaign world rather than just being a total outsider to it. Game masters love it if you show interest in the game world, so this is going to earn you a few kudos. Two, it gives you as a player a sense of ownership. This is my city. You can see it right here on the map. Maybe we'll visit, or hopefully we're not going to visit it because I'm not allowed back there. But also three, all the characters and the elements from your character's backstory are going to be much easier for the game master to incorporate naturally because the NPCs that are from that land are all from somewhere in the campaign map. They're somewhere that the campaign is taking place rather than all coming from some distant lands far away. So game masters, when your players start coming up on where their characters came from, when villages and cities and countries that they all originated from, you should provide them with a map if at all possible. Give them the world that you want them to populate. If you simply just leave it up to them with no direction at all, once again, you're not going to be able to blame them from just choosing a direction of their own because you didn't help them find one. Next, players, when you're making your backstory, make sure that it's realistic for the character that you're starting with. If your character was a decorated war hero who led the attack against the rebels on the Shattered Islands, then you might also want to explain how it is that this character is only first level. In my experience, it's far better for your character to have more humble, although they can still be exciting, origins if the character is going to be starting off at the lower rungs of the advancement ladder. Now, if your characters are all going to be starting off mid or high level, sure, you can have all sorts of glorious battles and decorations in your past, but if you're going to be starting off, first or second or third level, then you probably shouldn't have an origin story that involves you doing things that a character of that level would not be able to do, unless that is somehow mentioned in your backstories how you were able to do that, but you can't do that anymore. Next, discuss with your game master how much of your backstory do they want? How much should you give them? Do they simply want a one-paragraph synopsis with bullet points, or do they want a one-page backstory? Verify all this before you drop a 200,000-word manuscript in their lap and expect them to study it. You want to make sure that you give your game master enough that they can work with it, but not so much that they feel overwhelmed and end up ignoring it altogether because it's just too big. Why even bother starting it? Or if it's so big, they might end up gravitating to a lot of different details that they find interesting that you don't find as interesting, and there aren't the details that you really want them to gravitate to and pull back in your future. So ask your game master beforehand how much backstory they want you to give them. Now, game masters, now it's up to you to tell your players how much backstory you want them to give you. But players, you do need to give your game master something. You're either going to have to give them an electronic file or hand them a physical copy, but you will have to give them a copy of your backstory. Don't just tell it to your game master and expect them to remember. I have trouble remembering what it was that I ate yesterday, let alone a character backstory that one of my players told me about 2 months ago. Now players, if you want to make a longer and more detailed backstory than what the Game Master is asking for, then go for it. That's perfectly fine. Please make as detailed a backstory as you want, but that is for you. Give your Game Master no more than what they ask for, but if you want to make more for you, then that is perfectly fine. Go right ahead. Personally, for me, whenever one of my players gives me their character backstory, the biggest thing that I want to see is that it answers a very simple question of how did you get here? How, with all the drama and the excitement, betrayal, tragedy, and intrigue of your past, did you come from your humble beginnings as a regular person to becoming an adventurer? What brought your character into this specific town, into this specific tavern on the night that the adventure hook drops? When somebody comes in and asks for help and you raise your hand and say, why yes, I would love to go explore the haunted house. Or why yes, I would love to go kill goblins in the past that are attacking all of the merchant caravans. If your character came from the faraway land of somewhere or another, what brought you to this land? Give me a path of how you started from being an orphan stable boy all the way to being the gun-for-hire adventurer that you are at the start of the first session. Of course, there are going to be a few exceptions to that. There's always exceptions in role-playing games. I've personally done a few campaigns where I specifically told my players that I didn't want them to play adventurers. I wanted them to play average people that had the potential to become adventurers. But those were special requests by me as the game master, is something that I want, where the critical step of where they were going to go from average people to adventurers was something that we were going to role-play out over the course of the campaign. So the big key when you're doing your character backstory is that it answers the question as how they became the person they are once the game begins. I have seen some spectacular backstories, but where the characters still failed to answer that simple question. And that question is, at what point did you go from being an interesting NPC to a player character? Another thing worth mentioning is a lot of players are interested in doing what we call secret backstories. Maybe they're a fugitive on the run. Maybe they're a spy for a foreign power. Maybe they have a tragic past and they're on a quest for vengeance and they don't like talking about those painful memories. However, in my personal experiences, those secret backstories that player characters have are much more enjoyable and much more successful if they're known to the rest of the players around the table. Now, it's perfectly fine if none of the other player characters know, and once again, all of this is always going to be case by case, but the success rate of characters that have backstories that are a mystery to everyone inside and around the table is far less than most people would think. I personally prefer that all the players around the table know whatever the secret is. That way we can all enjoy the secret as it kind of unfolds and different dramas happen with it in it. Even if the player characters inside the game have no idea, or it might take a while before they discover it, or maybe they won't discover it at all, it's much more successful in my experience if all of the players know what the secret is very early on. Now, this is one of the biggest points that I want to make today. When I spoke earlier about the frequent player complaint that I see of players saying, well, my game master isn't incorporating my backstory enough in the campaign, and how my knee-jerk response whenever I see that complaint is, well, that's likely your fault. While the reason that it could be the player's fault could be one of the points that I mentioned earlier, that it's not coming from somewhere on the map, or it doesn't really work for the campaign, or they never verified it with the game master to begin with, the most common culprit why it is a player's fault is that the player does not realize that 95% of incorporating the character's backstory is the player's responsibility. The backstory shouldn't just be a list of NPCs that might pop back up in the character's life. The backstory should explain and be apparent in the ways that the character behaves after they start playing. Let me show you an example. After jumping back into the star system and passing through customs, your characters make it to the starport's cantina. Patrons from all over the system stand at the bar and sit at the various tables, murmuring in half a dozen alien languages. The bar itself stands in the middle, operated by a surly-looking man with a cybernetic arm. I guess I'll just go sit at a table. My character is a wanted man on 2 systems. This would have been a great time for me to bring in a bounty hunter or someone who knows who I really am. He totally dropped the ball on me. I guess I'll sit down with him. I can't believe Theft didn't give me a message about my thick sister once we arrived back in message range. I mean, the entire motivation for my character is getting money to cure her illness. It's a great backstory, and I wasted it on this character because he isn't using it. I'm gonna go to the bar and get us some space whiskey. I can't believe there's no Omicrons here. Seth should know how much my character hates them, and a bar fight would be a fun way to apply my backstory. Lazy-ass game master might as well not have a backstory if he ain't gonna use it. Okay, so we have 3 characters that enter a bar, and all 3 players are disappointed the game master isn't weaving elements from all of their personal backstories into that scene because it would have been a great opportunity for it. That makes sense. On the surface, that sounds like a very legitimate complaint. But at the same time, all 3 of those players failed that scene even more than the game master did. Now watch this. The bar itself stands in the middle, operated by a surly-looking man with a cybernetic arm. Okay, since my character is a wanted man, I want to be sure that I don't see any patches or insignias from any of those systems that are looking for me. Roll a recon. 9? You don't see any, but it's kind of hard to tell with the group on the far side. Then I'm going to choose a table far away from them. And I want to see if I can position myself in a way that I can watch them through mirrors or reflections, because I am paranoid there could be bounty hunters. Once he sits down, I'm going to join him and immediately open up my data tablet to see if there's any missed messages or updates about my sick sister. No messages. Oh, well then I'm going to shoot a message to my mom to tell her that I got the money and I'm going to be sending it to her soon. There any Omicrons here? You don't see any. Good, because I go to a different bar if there were any. Well, this is the only bar on the space station. And it's a good thing there aren't, otherwise I'd have to kick their butts. I'm going to go get us some space whiskeys. So here we had the exact same setup, and instead of just waiting and expecting for the Game Master to pull all their backstories in, each of the players takes charge and shows how their character is going to behave and respond based off of their own backstories for themselves. The Game Master at this point is merely playing off of all the players as they investigate things or doing things that they want to do, such as checking for messages or looking for people that they don't want to see. This is a much better scene all around, and it's all because the players applied their own backstories to their own actions. And the other huge benefit that happens when players do this is, one, it reminds everybody at the table, especially the Game Master, that these backstories are there. And two, it stresses to the Game Master that these backstories are important to the players around the table, and this now means that the Game Master, the chance of them applying backstories in future games and working all that in, has exponentially increased. Sometimes Game Masters, we need a little bit of a reminder as far as that the backstory is important to all the players around the table, or even what those backstories are. So it's good to give a Game Master a reminder from time to time, and it's far more effective of a reminder by demonstrating your enthusiasm towards your backstory and how your character is approaching it and reacting off of it than it is just to gripe at your Game Master for not using your backstory that you're not using either. But whether a Game Master ever uses the backstory or not, it doesn't change the fact that the players are all using them, and that improves and only rounds out their own characters. Also, when a Game Master does decide to bring a backstory back into a character's life, it's going to make a lot more sense for the story narrative if the PC has been referring to their backstory all along. Imagine you're watching some television show and you've been enjoying it for a while, then in one random episode in Season 3, the hero mentions that they don't want to go visit Australia because their sister was eaten by dingoes when they were a kid. Now, if this character in this TV show has never once mentioned sisters or dingoes or an aversion to Australia, this revelation in Season 3 is going to feel weirdly random. It's going to feel like something that the writers just came up with to tack on to add a little bit of drama about this episode that happened to involve Australia. However, for those 2 or 3 seasons leading up to it, the characters have been making regular comments about something that happened in their past, reference to a sister that died, or a hatred of dingoes, or a fear of Australia. Then it's going to feel much more natural in Season 3 when this episode comes up and a character has to look at Australia and deal with some sort of tragedy from their past. So a player who's regularly implementing pieces from their own backstory is now just laying the groundwork for that eventual day that might lead back to their past when the Game Master decides to latch onto that and bring that back into the game itself. And now it's going to feel much more natural and less randomly tacked on. So while yes, a Game Master is strongly encouraged to weave the backstory into the game, the bulk of that needs to be done unprompted by the players themselves. This is also helpful to remember if the Game Master might need to wait a few games before they can bring your backstory back in, so definitely be patient. Depending on the campaign and how many players and therefore backstories they have, it might take several games before your backstory becomes a big plot point. Also, the Game Master might be waiting until your character has reached a certain level or certain skill threshold before they want to weave your backstory back in. Let's take Inigo Montoya. Inigo has this wonderful backstory. His father was killed by a six-fingered swordsman. Inigo's quest for revenge has led him to a lifetime of training. He tells us about this when he meets the man in black, asking if the man has 6 fingers on his right hand. He then tells us the story about his father. Inigo prompts this discussion, so the player in this case utilized their backstory and brought it up himself. Later we meet the villain from Inigo's past and Inigo gets his duel. So from a viewer's perspective, we have a quick resolution of all this. Within 2 hours, we learn of Inigo's story, and then he gets revenge. It's all nice and neat. However, that's not how it went at all for Inigo. By the time we even met him, he is one of the greatest swordsmen alive. He spent 20 years training for this duel. He is not a first level character. He's not even a 7th level character. He is a veteran character. So in game terms, Inigo's Game Master didn't bring the 6-fingered man back into Inigo's life until he had actually grown all the way up to where he was powerful enough to face him. This took a while, but this whole time, Inigo's player never forgot. He still was always looking for his enemy, and he was always very quick to tell his own backstory. And eventually the Game Master did bring in Inigo's backstory. So players, don't expect your own backstory to come back in right away. It might take you 10 levels before the Game Master even begins considering using it once you're powerful enough, and therefore it thematically makes sense that now you are ready for revenge, or now you are ready to retake the throne. But that whole time, while you're waiting for the Game Master to bring it back in, you need to be employing your backstory yourself. However, sometimes a Game Master Master is not always going to be able to weave a backstory back into the campaign. So, let's say you've done everything right. You've given the Game Master a compelling backstory with interesting characters and possible hooks for future adventures, and it's all perfectly fitted into the game world that the Game Master has planned for you and that you're going to be playing in. You gave the Game Master exactly the right amount of information that they requested. Good job. However, for many reasons that are going to be completely outside of your control, the Game Master might not be able to incorporate it, or might not be able to incorporate it for an extendedly long period of time. And that's because when the Game Master tells you where the campaign is going to be beginning, they aren't necessarily divulging to you where the campaign is going to go. Sometimes it might go somewhere very different than you're initially expecting. So let's say your campaign is set in 1930s Europe, and the machines of war are beginning to stir, and the Nazis are increasing their military power. You and your brave team of spies are sent to capture a German submarine and learn what nefarious plans the enemy has in store. All of you have beautiful backstories, friends and enemies, loves and hatreds, all spun in elaborate narratives that you hope your Game Master is going to employ. Maybe old rivals or old flames are going to reappear in your life. Maybe your campaign is going to weave in a lot of their real history, and now your characters are taking part in events that did actually happen in history. However, then 1 hour into your first game, after you've taken this Nazi submarine, the heroes are suddenly all captured in a whirlpool, and they're suddenly deposited inside the hollow earth that's populated by dinosaurs. They're now the first humans here in over 1 million years, and now the campaign is going to follow them as they fight to survive, conserving their now limited ammo as they brave this strange land on a quest to get back home to the ones that they love. If you were to do a campaign like that, which is certainly awesome sounding, it doesn't make much room for bringing in a lot of characters and elements from a player character's past, because getting back to where they started is what the whole theme is. Yeah, sure, it would be possible for the Game Master to bring in some rescue expedition or something like that that might involve characters from a player's past, but that's not going to be a very common thing. It's going to be hard for a Game Master to do that very often, so best to assume that the players are not going to be able to have much of their backstory brought back in by the Game Master, and until then it's completely their own job to be responding to their own backstories. Sometimes a Game Master's been planning all along to throw in some sort of fun twist where they're hurled like John Carter into a strange and distant land. Other times, this was something that the Game Master hadn't planned at all. Sometimes through the course of the adventures themselves, through magic items or technology and a few bad dice rolls, now to everyone's surprise at the table, the plot has now shifted to the player characters trying to get home from somewhere else, kind of like Star Trek Voyager. So, if for whatever reason the campaign has now shifted to a way that's not very friendly with the Game Master incorporating the backstory, the players should still all respond and use their characters in a way that reflects what their own backstories are. So players don't dwell on the fact that your backstory might not be used as often or in the same way that you were originally wanting it to be. Instead, you should focus and enjoy in what it is that you have and what the Game Master has given you, rather than focusing all your attention onto what you don't have. In my experience, people that seem to focus more on what they don't have rather than what they have are the ones that forget to have fun. And after all, having fun is what this is all about. Hi, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, just hit that subscribe button. But until next time, players, Excelsior! You know, eventually you're going to have to address my own backstory where I don't even know what my real name is.